How did a German king crowned by a pope in 962 come to claim the legacy of the Roman emperors nearly half a millennium after Rome had already fallen? And how did the baptism of a Frankish warlord in 508 start a political and religious alliance that would eventually become one of the longest-lasting empires in European history? This is the epic and tangled origin story of the Holy Roman Empire, not as a sudden creation, but as the result of centuries of warfare, religion, diplomacy, and ambition. To understand how this empire began, we have to go back to a time when Europe was still clawing its way out of the ruins of Rome. In the brutal world of post-Roman Gaul, kings weren't crowned in cathedrals, they were forged in blood, and Clovis I, as king of the Franks, was no exception. Ruling from around 481 AD, Clovis was one of many Germanic chieftains carving up the decaying corpse of the Western Roman Empire. But unlike his rivals, Clovis would make a decision that reshaped the future of Europe, not with a sword, but with water. At first, Clovis was a typical pagan warlord. His early reign was filled with campaigns to subdue rival tribes. The Alemanni to the east, the Visigoths to the south, and smaller Frankish groups to the north. But his greatest conquest didn't come through warfare alone. It came through conversion. His wife, Clotilde, was a Burgundian princess and a devout Catholic. She repeatedly urged Clovis to abandon his gods and embrace Christianity, but he refused, until the day the battlefield gave him no other option. During a fierce conflict with the Alemanni, Clovis, facing the collapse of his army, prayed to the Christian God for victory. He won, and as promised, he submitted to baptism. Around 508 in the city of Reims, Clovis was baptized by Bishop Remigius in a ceremony soaked in symbolism. With this act, Clovis did something no other Germanic king had done. He embraced Nicene Catholicism, the form practiced by the remaining Roman population of Gaul. This was a game changer. At the time, most of the other Germanic rulers, the Visigoths in Spain, the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Burgundians in southeastern Gaul, had converted to Arian Christianity, a belief deemed heretical by the Church. That meant that despite their power, they were outsiders to the Catholic establishment. But Clovis, he became their champion. His baptism wasn't just a personal choice, it was a political masterstroke. By converting to Catholicism, Clovis gained the support of the Roman clergy, the educated elite who still held real influence in former Roman cities. The bishops saw in him a protector, the Church saw in him a partner, and the Gallo-Roman population, who viewed most Germanic rulers as barbarian heretics, now had a king who shared their faith. This alliance paid off immediately. With the blessing of the Church, Clovis expanded his rule, defeating the Visigoths at the Battle of Vouillé in 507 and seizing much of southwestern Gaul. His domain became not just a Frankish kingdom, but a Catholic kingdom, the first of its kind among the Germanic peoples. What Clovis created wasn't yet an empire, but it was the seed of something far greater, a union between Christian authority and Germanic kingship, a bond that would echo through centuries, culminating in the imperial coronation of Charlemagne and eventually the formation of the Holy Roman Empire. Charles Martel's grandson was Charlemagne, one of the most powerful rulers in European history. By the late 700s, Charlemagne ruled a vast domain stretching across modern France, Germany, the Low Countries, and northern Italy. But Charlemagne wasn't just a conqueror. He promoted education, sponsored monasteries, reformed laws, and acted as both king and spiritual guardian. He considered himself a ruler not just of land, but of Christian civilization itself. In 800 AD, he took that ambition one step further. That year, he marched to Rome to protect Pope Leo III, who had been attacked and nearly blinded by political enemies. In return, on Christmas Day, inside the old Basilica of St. Peter's, Leo placed a golden crown on Charlemagne's head and declared him Emperor of the Romans. This moment shocked many, even Charlemagne himself, who reportedly wouldn't have entered the church if he'd known the Pope planned to crown him. Still, the message was clear. The Roman Empire in the West was back. But was it really? Charlemagne ruled from Aachen, not Rome. His empire was Frankish, not Latin. But symbolically, this new title connected Charlemagne to the ancient Caesar Ungdul and suggested that only the Pope had the authority to bestow imperial legitimacy in the Christian West. This fragile balance of sword and cross would define the new empire and spark centuries of church-state struggles. After Charlemagne's death in 814, his empire quickly splintered. His son, Louis the Pious, struggled to hold it together. When Louis died, his three sons began fighting for control. The result was the Treaty of Verdun in 843, a major turning point in European history. The Carolingian Empire was split into three zones: West Francia, roughly modern France, ruled by Charles the Bald East Francia; the future heart of Germany, ruled by Louis the German Middle Francia; a weird, unstable stretch from the Netherlands to northern Italy, ruled by Lothair, who kept the imperial title but not much real power. The imperial title became little more than a formality. Real power lay with local nobles, dukes and bishops. But East Francia, the kingdom of Louis the German, would eventually evolve into the Kingdom of Germany and become the foundation of the Holy Roman Empire. By the early 900s, East Francia was a fragmented mess. Viking and Hungarian invasions combined with infighting among nobles had weakened royal authority. But in 919, the nobles elected a new kind of king, Henry I, Duke of Saxony, known as the Fowler. He wasn't a Carolingian, he didn't even claim Roman heritage, but he was strong, practical, and respected. Henry reorganized the kingdom, built fortifications, and struck truces with external threats. He refused to be crowned by the Pope, a sign that he saw kingship as something granted by the nobility, not the church. And most importantly, he laid the groundwork for his son, Otto the Great, to restore royal power and expand beyond Germany. Otto came to power in 936 with big ambitions. He immediately began asserting dominance over rebellious dukes and asserting that kingship came from divine authority, not just noble consensus. His greatest military triumph came in 955 at the Battle of Lechfeld, where he decisively defeated the Magyars, early Hungarians, ending decades of terror across Central Europe. Otto's victory wasn't just military, it was symbolic. He was seen as the defender of Christendom. In the 960s, Otto marched into Italy, where political chaos had paralyzed the peninsula. The Pope, John IV, in need of protection, crowned Otto as emperor in 962. But this time the title wasn't just ceremonial. Otto now ruled both Germany and northern Italy. He appointed bishops as his administrators, merging church and state. The emperor wasn't just a warlord, he was God's representative on earth, ruling a Christian empire. Thus, the Holy Roman Empire was formally born, a fusion of the Kingdom of Germany, the Catholic Church, and the revived idea of Roman imperial authority. Otto I's successors carried on the imperial dream. Otto II tried to expand deeper into Italy, but was defeated by Muslim forces near Calabria. Otto III, deeply influenced by Byzantine culture, dreamed of reviving the glory of Rome. He moved his court to Italy and styled himself as a Roman emperor. But died young at 21, Henry II, the last Ottonian, shifted focus back to Germany. He strengthened ties with the papacy and worked to Christianize Poland, Hungary, and Bohemia, laying the religious foundations for a broader European identity under imperial oversight. By the time the Ottonian dynasty ended in 1024, it had transformed East Francia into the Kingdom of Germany, fully tied to the imperial title and bound in partnership, and sometimes rivalry, with the papacy. The Holy Roman Empire was now a recognized political and religious institution, one that would dominate Central Europe for nearly a millennium, surviving everything from crusades to reformations until it finally collapsed under the weight of the Napoleonic Wars in 1806. So what was the Holy Roman Empire, really? It wasn't a simple revival of Rome. It wasn't a single, centralized empire. It was a complex, evolving network of kings, bishops, nobles, and emperors, all bound together by the idea that Europe needed a spiritual and political leader at its center. It was flawed, fragmented, and constantly changing. But for centuries, it was the political spine of the Christian West. If you learned something new today, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. And remember, every empire starts somewhere. Sometimes with just a baptism, a battle, and a very ambitious pope.